All right, welcome back to the RETCON 2021 Office Summit. I hope you're having an awesome time so far. Our next panel is titled Revolutionizing Property Management, how building owners and operators are using technology to boost their operations. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage. And I'll hand it over to Stacy, our moderator.
Hi guys, welcome to our panel on revolutionizing property management. I'm Stacy Lauder and I'm the Senior Vice President and Director of Property Management for the Meridian Group. We are a Bethesda-based real estate investor, developer, and owner in the Washington metropolitan area with $5.5 billion in assets. As we all know, technology is shifting the way buildings are managed today. From optimizing processes to project and facilities management software, as well as platforms that allow buildings to operate more sustainably. This panel will discuss the ways technology is revolutionizing the way buildings operate today. I'd like to give the panel speakers a chance to do their personal introduction. So Brian, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Stacy. My name is Brian Bennett. I'm the founder and CEO of Cortex Intel. What we set out to do is create the fastest and lowest cost way for buildings to cut emissions and to lower utility costs. Over 50 million square feet are now using our software and our machine learning, including the Empire State Building. Last year, we helped clients save over 85 gigawatt hours of electricity, which is the equivalent of taking over 13,000 cars off the road. And we're doing that in a way that doesn't require any new sensors, no equipment upgrades, no upfront capital costs at all, and contractually guaranteeing financial savings of at least 2 times our fees. So a little bit about me and the business, and looking forward to this conversation.
Great, thank you, Brian. Mark, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Ferris. I am Chief Operating Officer for Bridge Commercial Real Estate, which is the office vertical of Bridge Investment Group, which is a privately held real estate company. We have about $25 million of assets under management and about 4,000 employees. The assets under management are comprised of about 14.5 million square feet of office, 42,000 multifamily units, and about 12,500 senior housing units, along with a multi-billion-dollar opportunity zone development program. In addition to running the operations for the office vertical, I've also launched a solar company that's a subsidiary of Bridge Investment Group, which we're applying across the platform, primarily starting with our office portfolio, as well as launching a flexible office operation called A Bridge, which is catering to enterprise users in about 6 locations, all opening June 1 or thereabouts, in about 150,000 square feet, anticipated to grow upwards close to 1 million square feet. I also am looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you for that introduction, Mark. Bethany, would you like to go next?
Thank you. My name is Bethany Chang. I'm with CIM Group, and CIM is an owner and operator of real assets across the United States. We invest in office, industrial, retail, multifamily, as well as infrastructure assets, and we have approximately 30 billion of assets under management. I oversee CIM's real estate operations or property management team. As an owner, we also self-perform on the majority of our asset operations across all product types, including infrastructure. I'm looking forward to being on this panel and learning a little bit more about how other companies are innovating.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, David?
Hi, thanks, Stacy. I'm David Osborne. I'm the founder and executive chairman of a company called Building Engines. We build a modern operations management platform called Prism. The company is about 20 years old. I founded it back in 2001, and the grew it organically until about 2016 when we took on a private equity partner, and we've grown considerably since then. We are operating in about 3.5 billion square feet around the world in about 80 countries. And I think the most exciting thing that's happening today is that real estate is accelerating in its innovation and adoption of technology, and I'm really, really happy and excited to be part of that. And it's great to be on a panel of people who are all playing a part in that marketplace. Our main market spaces are commercial office, retail, and industrial, and we're looking to expand into other market spaces as we grow.
Great, thank you. Well, I appreciate everyone's time on this panel today. Technology has definitely boomed over the last year, and I think unfortunately COVID had a lot to do with that in accelerating technology advancements and how we're using them. So can't wait to hear about what you guys are doing and seeing. So I'll just jump in. I would start with, how can technology enable property managers to predict maintenance issues? And so David, would you like to start with that question?
Well, first I'll say it's a great question, Stacy. I mean, predictive maintenance, which is very different than preventive maintenance, has been sort of the holy grail for operations management. I heard about it 15 years ago, and I've talked with many companies over the years that have sort of gotten excited about the ability to actually predict when a problem might arise in a building or when a piece of equipment might be close to failure. And it's been a very difficult thing to do, but as technology has improved and you've seen innovations like IoT, which is, operating devices within the building that are smart enough to communicate with your application, and you've seen the growth of data and data visualization and data analysis, it's allowed the engineering team and the property management team to see what's happening in the building a lot more clearly, certainly in real time. In the old days, it used to be only after the problem occurred, so it was reactive. This is really more proactive. And I'm happy to say that the technologies that once promised that predictive maintenance was here to stay are actually operating effectively now. And you can see alerts and thresholds that are actually sending out communications to the engineering and the property management team on a timely basis to allow them to head off problems long before they occur. And that's really revolutionary. It's really exciting. And I think it's really going to be a big part of the next phase of application development in our space, both mobile and web-based.
I'm sure that that's helping improve tenant satisfaction too, if you're being proactive instead of reactive.
Certainly the buildings continue to operate. And one of the bigger problems in operations management, have to do with water damage. It's the main problem for building operators. And so when a leak occurs, generally in the past you heard about it well after the leak had started and the damage was done. But now with IoT and some of the data tools that are available on the operations management front, the property management team can actually respond to it in real time. And then not only that, but also in some cases can see it happening before it really becomes a big problem, particularly with some of the devices that they can place onto the water feeds within the building. So it's just the beginning for predictive maintenance. I think as the years go by, we're going to see some really exciting new technologies come to the market.
Yeah, I agree with that.
To respond to that comment though, about tenant satisfaction, I do think that the predictive maintenance, is making us smarter and more efficient, and ultimately is making, the office tenants happier, because it's, as David said, it allows us to correct issues before they happen or shortly after they happen, before they become real issues. And I think it also allows us to, manage the operating expenses that both the owner and the tenant share in, in a much better way, where, some of the predictive technology out there will tell you when a fan belt breaks on a mechanical piece of equipment, or right before it's about to break, based on how the motor's running, and being able to address that before it happens to keep the tenants comfortable. And that's just one example. Absolutely translates to you know, the sausage making behind delivering property management services. So I think, you know, the combination of happy tenants and a stronger bottom line are all very exciting things for us in this industry to focus on, and really what's driving a lot of this technology.
Are you or anyone on the panel finding that these technologies, or that one in particular, with the predictive preventive maintenance, is allowing you to maybe downsize the number of engineers you need at a building?
Well, yeah, I think that this is David. I think that the end result of the application of any technology is going to see more efficiency on the employment front. But I don't think it necessarily means it's going to eliminate engineers. And I think it will allow them to work more efficiently. Certainly with proximity capabilities, it'll allow it to produce a lot more within the same period of time. And when it's predictive, it'll certainly reduce the damages that are in the building. So I don't think that you'll see tremendous results, in the reduction of staff, but I think the staff will become smarter and more technically adept.
I would echo David's sentiments that we have used predictive technologies, and they've been helpful in reducing operating expenses and also making the right capital investment decisions. But we haven't seen staffing reductions for it. I do think we're more efficient. We can get to things faster, but I don't anticipate significant headcount reductions on engineering due to the use of technology.
Got it.
Go ahead,
I'm just going to build on that for a moment. Yeah, I mean, I think we work closely with building engineers with our software. They're the primary user of our software, and I think whether it's predictive maintenance or other kind of operational insights, I think there's this really interesting opportunity to use technology to shift the activities of engineers from like damage reduction reaction to value creation. Whether that's on the kind of predictive maintenance side, whether that's about adapting the equipment to respond to the tenant's needs kind of more proactively.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that that's what we're seeing as well. We spent a lot of time.
I would say after years of doing more with less, the technology allows, the efficiency on the intelligence in a building for the engineering staff to focus on the value add, propositions.
Yep, I agree. Well, thank you. So follow up, how can technology help make capital improvement projects cheaper and more efficient? David, do you want to start with this one as well?
Well, sure. Let me give a little bit of history about capital improvement, at least from my point of view. It's a cyclical thing, and generally there's an assessment done at a certain time in the year on a particular building or a region of buildings, and from that assessment comes a set of activities that need to be addressed for the particular building, and those are combined with plans from the prior year. So it's a cyclical opportunity, but with technology, that assessment can happen in real time, and it can happen throughout the year, and it can be much more reactive. So when conditions change or when a piece of equipment is under duress, or there's a particular need within the building that the tenants are expressing but it's not being met, technology's really enabled the property management team, the asset management team, to see much more clearly not only what's happening in the building and how they need to address it, but the sentiment within the building and how they need to address that as well. So those technologies, and it's a combination of them, have really provided another level of information to the asset management team to allow them to plan far better and on a more timely basis. So it's pretty exciting, and it's improving year after year.
Great. We're at Meridian, we're looking strongly at some AI technologies that will allow us to decide on what capital improvement projects to do, how much those are going to cost, what the payback periods are, and also energy reduction as well. So we're investigating some different technologies. Anyone else seen different things out there with regards to the capital improvement technologies?
I would. I'm sure everybody on this panel has, and so it's just whoever speaks up first. So if I'm interrupting,
chime in.
But I guess, I would reframe the question to, rather than saying, rather than using the words cheaper and more efficient, I would use the words, how is it adding value? And because I think that's kind of a historical way of, well, how is it cheaper and how is it more efficient, which implies basically, how is it just saving me money or saving somebody else money? But at the end of the day, I think, more and more investment firms and operating firms, and companies that serve those customers like David's and Bryan's, are looking at what's the smartest thing to put our capital into in our buildings. So, as an example, a piece of equipment may not be at the end of its useful life, but it may be smart to replace it now rather than waiting, and that's a capital investment that should be considered if the reduction in utilities, because the technology in that equipment has moved along, ultimately ends up reducing expenses and increasing NOI, and you cap that at some projected disposition date, and all of a sudden you say, wow, that's something that in the old days we would have waited till the chiller was 40 years old before we started talking about replacing, or maybe a little younger than that. But
you're dating yourself, Mark.
you get my point. And I think what we do is we have a whole energy plan program that we look at when we're buying a building that kind of outlines the value tier 1 initiatives. And then we look at that energy plan every year, and we kind of put together a scorecard that rates where we are, and we readjust based on the business plan of the asset. I think, kind of on the predictive analytics piece also, which is the added value component of this, is, it really does allow you, instead of replacing, the equipment by way of putting a capital, investment into it, it really does, for those efficient pieces of equipment, allows you to extend the useful life of it, and to maintain it at a level that, the efficiency doesn't degrade over time, so that it's a valuable piece. So I think those two things would be what I would focus on.
I'll jump in there as well. I'll use an example from a building we acquired in Austin, Texas, that we had identified that we were going to need to do a large HVAC unit replacement, just based upon the age of the equipment. But when we installed technology actually tracking its usage, we saw that it was underutilized. And so we could first extend the useful life. And the second thing that we were able to do is, when we did eventually do a replacement, we did it with a smaller unit, saving us money, because it was really oversized as new technology came on.
Yeah, if I can add to that, there's a whole other side to it as well, which is the sentiment side, which I think is really interesting. It's very much a trend, and that's to better understand what the occupant is looking for. So there's a tremendous amount of investment made within a building to provide this, the assets, the resources to the occupant that satisfies their need, but those needs change. And how do you read those needs? How do you interrogate, the occupant set to figure out what it is they require? And particularly today with the millennial group, where their needs have changed tremendously. So that the technology applied to sort of change the concept from tenant satisfaction to occupant experience. And what are you going to invest in order to make the building serve the occupant base that you actually have better? And that's a big question for asset managers every year. And I think technologies, particularly some of these tenant experience technologies, have allowed them to figure that out better and be more accurate, make better investments.
David, I think that's a great point. We've actually been rolling out tenant portals that are, and it's really occupant portals, and I'll build upon that use of the word, because I think many times the technology access for tenants was really just with whoever the tenant manager was communicating with the property manager. We've been expanding the use of our portals to really increase community and increase adoption and touch for every user in the building, and it improves tenant satisfaction. But it's also allowing us to do is survey tenants or all occupants to see what they want in the building. So, a lot of times you'll hear perhaps from your leasing agent, hey, you need a gym. But when we surveyed some of our occupants, they actually said, I don't really need a gym. I really just want a better shower and bike lockers, so that for biking to work, it made it a better experience. We saved a lot of money by not investing in a gym that was underutilized and actually served our building occupants better.
Good point.
Good to hear.
Yep.
I would say our tenants have been telling us what they want for a very long time, and now we're just a little bit more nimble to be able to react quickly.
Well, I think the occupant experience, the tenant engagement piece in deciding on capital improvement projects is key these days too. I mean, it's just things are done much different today. Brian, in particular, in what you do at Cortex, what can technology help to inform? What role is technology playing to make buildings more sustainable today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think it's a fascinating time right now for sustainability. It's a space I've been looking at pretty closely for the last 15 years or so. And, I think it's something that's been discussed a lot. But what we're seeing is, I think, a rolling wave of sustainability incentives and mandates. And a few data points on that. I mean, I think we're seeing it in markets like New York City requiring an 80% reduction in energy use by 2050. I mean, that's really substantial. The fines could be really meaningful. I don't think that's an isolated case. I think we're going to see and are starting to see that roll out across other parts of the country. The Biden plan is going to kind of add legs to that at the federal level, and then we're also seeing investors and occupants or tenants shift their perspective on sustainability. So I think as a category, I think it's a really interesting moment, and we're kind of on this front end of a really meaningful wave. I think it can be kind of audacious sometimes, the requirements. I mean, 80% reduction feels like a lot. I think that the good news is that there's possibilities today to drive really significant reductions quickly without much, if any, upfront cost. And the reason for that is just because the amount of data being collected by buildings today is dramatically higher than it was before. It's because machine learning and AI technology today is not, is far beyond where it was before. And so you can marry those two things together to, very quickly, again, without having to add sensors, without having to upgrade equipment, leverage that data, process it, and arm the operators, the building engineers that are in the buildings every day trying to figure out, using their own judgment, what equipment to run and when and how much. We can arm them with a tool, a mobile app, a web app, whether it's ours or somebody else's, that can, help them be more precise, complement the human learning with machine learning, and create fast energy savings, financial savings, and so I think, and I think that the possibilities here are really meaningful. So I think it's a really kind of exciting time for the category. And that's a little bit of how we're, how we see it and what we're doing.
Are you all in the technology piece? Are we feeling that technology has to move so quickly to keep up with now what the world expectations are with sustainability and the new jurisdictional guidelines that you mentioned? I mean, in Washington, D.C., same thing with the governor there. I think it's by 2025 that certain things have to be reduction in energy. And can technology keep up with helping buildings be more sustainable? We have fund investors, requesting information on that with ESG, and they care a lot more about it today.
Well, I think it can lead the way, actually, and I think it has led the way to a large degree. I mean, historically, sustainability started with leadership in environmental engineering and design, everyone was going for silver and gold certification, and that was expensive, but it was an important trend, and it was great looking if you were doing it as an owner or a part of a management team. But that now is shifted from being something sort of driven by and wanting to look more green to actually being more green, and I think that sustainable sustainability ethos has been ingrained now in the market space, really principally driven by the tenants who want to see it in their buildings. And so owners have made it much more obvious to the tenants what they're doing in order to reduce their footprints. And the technology has allowed the owners to show the tenants how they're improving footprint reduction. It may not necessarily rise to the level of LEED certification, but really important steps. And only through that kind of communication can you see that the trend developing, growing, and becoming itself more sustainable. So I think, to answer your question, technology's kind of led the way. It's helped to communicate what's happening in the space, what the owners are actually doing, and now it's really part and parcel of operating your building.
I would agree. Without the technology, I don't think we could meet our tenant requirements that David really touched upon. But really, our investors are requiring and demanding across all of our funds that we report on our energy reductions. And we now are increasing the number of our funds that are GRESB reporters, and we have to have the right technology so that we can meet the demands of those reporting requirements and show year over year, because it's not just a single year. Every single year you have to be showing the what you're doing to improve the sustainability across your portfolio, as well as your company, in terms of your governance and your communication with tenants. So without those technologies, we certainly couldn't meet the local jurisdiction requirements or our investor reporting requirements.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. We've invested in technology in particular so we can provide meaningful content to our investors on a quarterly basis, and pulling all that information together the old-fashioned way just doesn't cut it anymore. So technology is definitely needed and appreciated.
Well, I have seen, if you walk into some lobbies, I know we all haven't walked into many lobbies over the last year, but if you do, you see a lot of the flat screen TVs are displaying footprint reduction graphs to the tenant base, which I think is really exciting because it really illustrates this new ethos of footprint reduction, which I love.
Yeah, and I can see a tenant walking in saying, we helped with that when you engaged a tenant to do that as well.
Yeah, and like we've said, it's important to the employees of the companies, and it's important to the companies. And I think, the technology has really helped us capture, along with it making us smarter and more efficient, it's helped us be able to measure what we're doing, which then translates to posting it in the lobbies and that feedback loop, which is so important. But I would say the sustainability piece, is broader. Sometimes we tend to just kind of migrate to utility savings, but the sustainability piece is really much broader than that. And there's
agreed.
we have talked to, kind of the next layer of those concentric circles of vendors, whether it's waste removal and recycling companies that, are now able to not only, measure what they're removing from your building and how that's being reused or not. They're also tracking how their trucks are driving to your buildings and being able to tell you, the most efficient, sustainable way that happens and the frequency that makes the most sense versus picking up, dumpsters when they're half full, waiting till they're full. And there's a technology component that feeds that intelligence, to those companies, and then likewise has a feedback loop, back to the owners. And then from what we're working on, I mentioned, the solar company that we launched this year. And I think that plays a major role for us, and, coupled with not only the federal government's, extension of the tax credit piece, but also, state governments and their SRECs that they give that make those projects viable. And when you look at the life of solar technology, has been around for a while, but to be able to take advantage of it where it makes financial sense along with sustainable sense has been very refreshing. We've gotten, very positive feedback from our customers. We've gotten very positive feedback from our employees, and we've gotten, tremendous feedback from prospective and existing investors. And so that's a win-win-win, for us, and it plays a big role in the decision making that we go through as we, strategically look, 1 quarter ahead or, years into the future as to what we're planning on doing.
Mark and Bethany, this is for you. Do you all think that you'll have a sustainability officer at some point within your ranks? Somebody who's charged with doing that within your portfolio?
We already do. We have a manager who leads, and she's on the property management team, who is the leader of our ESG initiatives. We also have a committee of our senior executives, that she reports to and makes suggestions. I think we also launched our very first corporate ESG report, which is, been a little, I would say that was maybe a little overdue for us, but it was great to see as a company that initiative get launched. And I would say it's not, I want to build off of Mark's point about it's not just utility savings, because for the E, right, because it's really all 3 letters that are important for sustainability. So for the E, we're doing some fun things, like we're doing more pollinator gardens, and we're doing a honeybee install on some of our buildings in New York. Those are just great community builders. I think the other thing that is really important is our governance as a corporate organization to meet a lot of the different requirements. And so that's not just something that lives in property management, but really extends throughout the entire company. The other thing I just wanted to mention is CIM is building one of the largest solar arrays in the United States in one of our infrastructure funds. And we brought on both development team members as well as operating team members to work on that solar field. That expertise has proven really critical on our real estate assets, because we've been able to, we always knew that solar was an opportunity, but we now are doing a national kind of portfolio review so that we can see which buildings is it best to install solar. Certain buildings, in certain markets, it's better to buy credits. And it was really through the expertise of someone who was building a actual solar install that we could bring that and save investors money and do it kind of the right way, rather than just like the first way that came to us.
Yeah, I love hearing those stories, because I think I think sustainability, ESG, is kind of migrating from being seen as 10 years ago a thing that just kind of had to be done, to something that could be strategically value add to a business to create a product that's more attractive to tenants, that extends the life of equipment, that's just operating what you have with greater intelligence and precision. mean, I think, you know, circling back to your question, Stacy, I can imagine it's now and for a little bit could feel, you know, for a lot of owners, you know, overwhelming as these federal or state or local requirements are getting put in place. And there's this natural question, like, is there technology that's available that can help us get there or not? And I think, you know, from my standpoint, I think there is, and I think it's going to be expanding a lot. I mean, I think today buildings can put in place technology that can drive a 10 to 20% reduction in energy use, and that's going to expand. I mean, I think that there's going to be ultimately, you know, buildings operated autonomously, bringing in data from all these disparate data streams and writing instructions back. I think it's too fast for most of the industry today, but I think that is a possibility that's going to happen, drive further savings there. And I think there's, you know, other interesting ways. I mean, tenants is an area that came up a few times in this conversation, but, you know, with buildings where, you know, tenants are driving 45% of the building's energy use, there's, I think, really interesting ways to engage tenants to drive awareness and behavior change using techniques that have worked in the residential space that the companies like OPower kind of pioneered and proved, that can help drive energy savings, but also create a more robust relationship with tenants, which again, I think could be value add more broadly.
How is everyone seeing the technology being used by asset management in particular to be more informed and help them make decisions to improve, you know, their portfolio performance?
I can start on this one, Stacy. Thanks. You know, I think back to the, you know, smarter and more efficient piece. That's what technology allows. You know, that's what asset management, I think, wants out of some of these technology platforms. So, you know, the kind of the biggest one that we use, we've got a business intelligence platform that aggregates data, you know, and then compares it, you know, performance against, you know, original business plan pro forma. And so we're looking at occupancy, we're looking at leasing velocity, we look at capital deployed, accounts receivable, rent trends, you know, those sorts of things, and it compares against the original, you know, assumptions, and allows, you know, the asset management teams to be nimble in making decisions, you know, when they need to change. I mean, I think in the multifamily world, that's been going on for a little while because things change a lot faster. Lease terms are shorter, and so, you know, market rates and that sort of thing happens, you know, more real time than it does in the office world. But some of that is translating to the office world because of technology. And I would say the other component is using, you know, a CRM program that allows, you know, that engagement with tenants not only to happen, but to happen where there's follow-up and there's a feedback loop. So, you know, it's on a program where you're understanding your tenant's needs, you know, more real time. And so if a tenant needs more space, the tenant doesn't have to wait for a phone call. Some of that feedback loop through a CRM program happens, you know, almost immediately. And I would say the third thing that comes to mind with technology and asset management is we use a document abstracting technology that is AI based, and so you kind of basically scan your leases and loan documents through it, and it abstracts those documents, and then, you know, you could sit there and just ask this application to give me a presentation of lease terminations that are out in the future over the next 12, 24, 36 months, and you can plan around that based on what your, you know, kind of that you're making. The company is actually called Abstract, and it's really fantastic. But I would say those three things are the things that come to mind that really help, you know, the asset management team make better decisions real time to guide the investment.
I'll jump in there as well. Stacy, I think you started the session by saying that COVID was a technology accelerator, and I sure think it was for us. one example of the use of technology to improve our asset management decisions was, collections. I think that, we've always tracked AR, right? And, tracking collections, but we needed very quickly to develop, weekly systems about knowing actual cash in the door during the height of the pandemic, so that we could manage our expenses and payables. And so we had to create in a hurry a lot of different reporting, just really leveraging our accounting system of record, as well as some outside companies who could help us pull reports and information in a very quick way. And that was critical to help inform on every single lease that we had to restructure during COVID. Just where we were on just knowing real time across a large portfolio where we were on payments, and then also creating using our tenant portals to communicate about what different subsidies were available on a market by market basis. And so that then our tenants could avail themselves of it. And also then help our, really secure our investors. And so without having the strength of these different reporting systems, I don't think we would have ever gotten through the height of the COVID crisis. I think the other thing that we did during COVID that was helpful was we leveraged residential specific technologies for some of our commercial tenants. And so we were borrowing from the virtual touring platforms because, you had to have virtual touring in a hurry across the apartment portfolio. And I think candidly, they were a step ahead of the office portfolio. But once we successfully deployed quickly across our apartment portfolio, we then used that same system for our office and retail tenants. And so, and it's definitely now, it's wholly the new way of touring. It's much more efficient for decision makers who aren't necessarily in that market. And I think having a high quality system has been helpful to keep our leasing momentum as we're seeing, some markets start to rebound.
That's a great, Bethany. We've done the same thing, and we've engaged with other firms that help you kind of do your own space planning real time. So you get to, not only tour the space, but you get to plan it the way you want it, all from your desk. And that's a great example.
From the technology side, I would say that it's all about data, and it's all about capturing the data, because we're talking about a very complex data space. We've got tenants, owners and managers and vendors, all of them generating data in and around the building space. And the challenge for the technologist is to understand the persona of the asset manager, and then to bubble up the information that's actually important to them, so that you're not providing them with tertiary data that they really can't do anything about. That's for someone else to work on. But you're providing them with trending data, recognition data, usage data that's bubbled up into a usable alert or a usable trend or a threshold that's been exceeded, so that they can act more efficiently. Because in the end, it's all about visibility, because visibility adds speed and accuracy for the asset manager, and that's hugely important. So for us, it's the technologist on the other side. It's how do we make that data more accessible and bubble it up in an intelligent way to that persona.
I would say actionable, right, David?
Yep, actionable.
Actionable.
Yep, actionable.
Yeah.
So
Great
tagging
word.
off that, and we started out talking about predictive maintenance issues, and switching to the property side, more specifically the engineers. What technologies is everyone seeing the building engineers are appreciating the most? What innovations are helping them do their jobs more efficiently? What are you seeing out there?
I'll jump in. I think we've talked a lot about the predictive maintenance and real-time energy tracking, and I think that's probably been one of the most critical tools for our building engineers to be more efficient. I also think this is during emergency situations. We've leveraged a technology that to communicate with our tenants when we've had emergency issues, so that we had a water main break, and and we couldn't allow tenants in the middle, and just having it readily accessible. I mean, our engineers were there overnight dealing with the city and getting everything and securing the building, but then being able to communicate with the tenants through text and email and call updates in an automated fashion has really saved both the engineers' time as well as our management team's time, and kind of then drives back to that tenant satisfaction that they understand and can then manage their staff from not having to enter the building when they cannot.
I think, building on what David mentioned, I think it's really about, understanding who are the building engineers, what do they care about? And I think it's interesting. I mean, they have a massive impact on energy use, energy spend, the experience of tenants in the building, but oftentimes ends up being a fairly thankless job. Where they're kind of being reached out to if there's a complaint, if there's an issue, and I think it's interesting. I mean, we spent a lot of time shadowing building engineers because we thought they were a really interesting vehicle to drive change, so I think what we found is there's just a lot of kind of intuition and judgment that they're being kind of tasked with, and it's fascinating. You go into a lot of kind of engine rooms or operating rooms, and there's a journal notebook, right, that they're writing down by hand information about each day, the temperature, when they started it up, how they're operating the equipment, what's happening. And the reality is, that information can be automatically ingested and presented and analyzed for them to support them. So really what we're doing in helping them operate with greater precision is take the decisions they're having to make every day, understands, the logic that they're applying, and then using data and machine learning to automate that so that the work can be done for them. And going back to the earlier conversation, they're still there, right? But they can focus on the value add rather than having to be reactive.
Got it. Well, we have 5 minutes left, and maybe 4. So I'm going to pose one additional question for the group. So jump in as quickly as you'd like. What challenges come with integration of new technologies, and what advice would you give to property managers who are hesitant to adopt technologies?
Well, I'll start with the integration question, if that's okay. I think take building engines in our development of our new product Prism. It's built with APIs at the core, and those application programming interfaces are critical to anyone who wants to integrate with a core platform that might be the database of record for a building or a portfolio of buildings. So from a technology point of view, you want to find a technology that has API at its core, because that will make integration much easier for all of the different vendors that you may want to bring in to your platform. They may be a siloed vendor that does something very well. If they can write to your API, then you can gather that data, you can integrate that system into your overall platform. So that's the platform side of that question. I'll let everybody else answer the other half, but that piece of it's really critical.
I'll jump in too. In preparation for this call, I printed off something, with all of our different applications, and it's 3 pages long. And so one of the things that that we've created in the past, 18 months, is we have someone on our property management team, as well as paired with our IT team, who is kind of the first gating reviewer of new technologies, especially when we're getting hit with so many. We don't want to go too far down the road to then find out it doesn't really integrate that well with all of the existing applications that we already have, or find out that it's duplicative. And so that's been helpful for us. And I think the biggest challenge is just training and communication to make sure everyone kind of understands what the new technologies are when you roll it out.
Fair enough. Any last comments?
I would just say, when it comes to folks that are slow to adapt, I've got this little cartoon on my phone of two guys from the Neolithic era. One guy's pushing a wheelbarrow with square wheels, and there's another guy chasing him with round wheels. And the guy with the square wheels is saying, "I don't have time right now."
Oh, I heard that.
That's great. That's exactly right.
That's great.
That is great.
Well, you are gonna, if you're not courageous enough to adopt technology, you are going to get left behind, and no one wants to be left behind. And in the end, technology is designed to make life easier, not harder. There is a bit of a learning curve for some people who are getting into technology for the first time. And I think building managers and engineers today are far more sophisticated than they were 20 years ago when I started the company. I can tell you a quick story. I was trying to promote building engines to an engineer and send him a whole bunch of emails. He said, "Well, we don't have the internet." And I said, "Well, you've been getting all of my emails." He goes, "Yeah, but we don't have the internet." And so that misunderstanding still exists a little bit today. You just have to have the courage to push forward and adopt. And you can try it in a building or two or a small region of your portfolio. Test it out. A lot of owners and managers do that. I think that's the best way to go.
Well, everyone, it's been a pleasure moderating, and I've really enjoyed thoroughly being on this panel today. So thank you for all your time.
Good job, Stacy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Wow,
much.
thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been an awesome panelist, and I know this has been an awesome panel, and I know the audience is giving you all a huge virtual round of applause.
Mhm.
And a special thank you to Stacy for moderating today. We really appreciate you sharing your insights. For the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and take some time to check out our amazing exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.
Bye.